Hey, it's Susie and it's Saturday. How about a little soul care? A number of years back when my youngest daughter Sarah was in college, she invited some girls, some friends of hers, over to the house for dinner. And we piled around my big dining room table and I made some chicken and dumplings and we dove into conversation and we talked, and there were a lot of complicated things going on in the girls' lives at that time. And one girl in particular, as she told me some of the pieces of her story, she started crying and she was just frustrated because she was trying to figure things out. And we all listened, and I could tell that she was really taxed at the situation that was going on in her life and the things that had happened to her, and she was whirling it around in her mind trying to figure it out, and obviously her heart hurt because she was tearful. And I did something that I've done a number of times since then when I mentor women. I offered a suggestion, a very simple suggestion. I just asked her if she had been reading any good stories lately, and she kind of stopped and she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Are you reading any good books lately? Not nonfiction. Are you reading any stories, any uplifting, feel good, redemptive stories?" And she said no. And so I walked in the other room and got her my favorite copy of Heidi, which is, some people think it's a children's story, but if you haven't read it in a while or you've never read it, I want to encourage you to read it because it's a very simple story with a very redemptive thread. And here's the thing. I think stories are good for your soul. Stories can help you take good care of you. There are a number of reasons why. There's actually a lot of research that indicates that reading stories helps you. There's a lot of brain chemistry involved and stuff like that. But the very simple, most easy to understand way that I can talk about it is that stories have a beginning and a middle and an end. And what we get to do when we read somebody else's story is we get to see how their story resolved, how they got out of their tough spots, what they did, what kind of character they had in the middle of tough spots. And then we get to see the resolution of their story. We get to see the beginning of their story, the middle of their story, which is usually the hardest time, and then we get to see the end. Friends, you are in the middle of a story. I'm in the middle of a story. And right now, I would bet that most of us could say that our stories seem kind of complicated. It's really hard for us to understand, how things are going to resolve. And one of the ways that I recommend exercising soul care is by you finding a really good book and reading it. And when I say a good book, I mean one that leaves you believing that God is in charge of the world. And it doesn't have to be a Christian book. One of my favorite authors is George MacDonald, and he's a brilliant writer who lived a long time ago, and he tells stories that are incredibly redemptive. Another one of my favorite authors is Lucy Maud Montgomery, and she's the one who wrote Anne of Green Gables, and she has a way of writing stories that capture our attention and distract us from our own problems and remind us that we're in the middle of a story. So today I just want to encourage you that you're in the middle of your story. It likely has some turns that you weren't anticipating. It has some situations that have come up that you weren't expecting. There's some crisis involved right now in your story. And I just want to remind you that God is still in charge, and He is the one writing your story, and you're still in the middle of your story. So my best advice this week for how you can take care of you is to find a good book to read. It can be a children's book. I read a lot of chapter books for children because they are usually pretty wholesome. It could be a more advanced book like something by George MacDonald, but pick up a good book. Walk yourself to the back patio, sit down, under the big sky, and remember that God is still in charge and that you're just in the middle of your story. I hope you're doing well out there, and I want you to know that I am thinking about you, and I'm praying that you are loving the one beautiful life that God has given you, because there is beauty buried deep somewhere. Much love and peace.